that we as humans recognize it too late, what an amazing paradise we can create with that type of regenerative agriculture. And swinging the machete is a good therapy, yeah.
Everybody should get a machete and get a food forest.
A lot of people would want to do something like that, but if they start with borrowed money and have to pay interest on it, it's just too hard. It's a beautiful journey, has its ups and downs, but trust it, you're on the side of life.
What if a German guy, an English girl, meet in Bolivia, have kids, and move to New Zealand and make their life all about syntropic agroforestry, permaculture, and biodynamic practices? This is Klaus Lotz, and together with his wife, Vanessa Keegan, they built the dream life in New Zealand. This is a new episode of the Food Forest podcast, and with me we have Klaus. Hey, Klaus, how are you doing?
Louis, yeah, great to talk to you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Tell me about your crazy adventurous life and your story, how you went up from Germany to Bolivia to New Zealand. How did that all happen?
Well, I guess I somehow didn't quite fit in my own country in certain ways, and always interested in growing plants and spending my time in forests. And then when I finished school, I got the opportunity for a practicum or thing, whatever you want to call it, in Brazil with a Swiss-German family. And that was quite an adventure. So I spent a year in Brazil and also traveling around Bolivia and Peru, meeting people.
If you talk about a Swiss family, is this Ernst Götsch you're talking about?
Yeah, that's Ernst Götsch and his family. Yes, they just bought their farm in Bahia in Brazil with some investor who wanted to see something like regenerative cocoa growing, as we would call it nowadays. And it was in '84. So I arrived there just a week after he purchased a 500-hectare property, and it was just all a very human unfriendly jungle full of thorns and snakes and ants of all sorts, and no food in it at all. No food.
Wow, so you were really there at the beginning of Ernst Götsch adventure in Brazil.
Yes, I mean he managed another farm before that further south in Bahia, another cocoa farm, but that one that he just bought then had no crops on it at all. It was just a regrowth of a very abused land, and we started chopping it down practically and mulched it, put it into piles of mulch and planted bananas in it and other things. That was my introduction to agriculture, basically.
What an introduction, because Ernst Götsch, the kind of the father of syntropic agriculture, you were there really at the beginning. Can you take us back to that experience? Can you put yourself in this time machine, go there, see yourself as a young guy arriving there, being bit by mosquitoes probably, and what were the first things you did, the first three things that you learned from Ernst?
Everything was new. Everything was a learning experience. There was not a minute that wasn't a learning experience. And it started out with actually just using your own body with some very simple hand tools to clear jungle, to prepare building material for huts and build huts and things like that, and then mulch and plant and do all these sort of things together with local workers who were very good at it. And it was quite humbling working with people that are so good with hand tools, making incredible stuff and learning from them. It was beautiful. And at the time, Ernst had his theories that we now know as the principles of syntropy. He had them already. He was in his head, he had it figured out, but he hadn't got the practical experiments to show much yet, but that was to come. But there were a lot of hardships on the way and a lot of learning for him to do still to fully grasp it. And for me, it was over my head in lots of ways, but nevertheless, there was a paradigm that I took on as how our food should be produced. And so I learned that new paradigm before I even knew the old paradigm.
Lucky you.
So that was good. And all around us, of course, there was a lot of abuse of land going on, a lot of burning, a lot of monocultures and so on. But at the same time, also some nice examples of small scale subsistence farms where they grew a lot of different crops all together in something like what we know as a food forest.
Yeah. What is if you look back at that period with Ernst still in his beginnings of experimenting with everything, the principles were already in his head, but you could experience it firsthand. If you had to say one thing that really changed everything in your mindset that you learned, like the one thing that like propelled you to go on this journey, what would that be?
Eat trees.
Love that you say that. We have a movie coming out called Eat More Trees.
I know. I had that in the back of my mind, and it's a great title because it's really what it is. We have to learn how to eat perennials, basically. That's what I got from Ernst. He also had a few books around that I was reading there, like the first books on tree crops, like from Smith, what's his name? Russell Smith, Tree Crops. Yeah, I read that when I was at Ernst, and that was part of his inspiration, and Robert Hart and stuff like that. And I got convinced right there and then that we need to live off food forests, that we need to eat trees. Yeah, definitely.
And in your opinion, why is that so important?
Because as soon as we do any annual agriculture, we ruin the land unless we're in a really privileged situation like the Nile Delta or wherever we started that business. Wherever we are on what we call in South America, we call terra firma, a land that doesn't get replenished by inundations. As soon as you farm terra firma with annuals, you're on a downhill road.
Yeah. And you will
good at sustainable farming, really good. But even most organic farms would be running downhill with annual cropping on terra firma, on hill country.
Yeah. Annuals in nature only exists when there has been a disaster and then the perennials come in. So we have to limit annuals. Oh, really, really glad to hear that from you. So how long were you with Ernst?
Twice for almost a year. Yeah, sort of like that.
And then you ended up in Bolivia afterwards?
Yeah, because when I was traveling, I ended up going to Bolivia to get the stamp for my passport. And then whilst I was at it, why not going to Machu Picchu and whatnot? Anyway, so I met people on the way that I then later, 3 years later, when I went to South America again, I actually stayed with to work with. It was my goodbye then from Germany the second time around. And so I wanted to live in South America. That was exciting.
Yeah. And is it there that you met your wife?
Yes, in La Paz. She was working for an aid organization, for Oxfam. I was working as a small grassroots organization doing appropriate technology at the time. There was my short time of straying away from Syntropy, but I found back to that. I was pushed back to it by whatever. But it also got me into permaculture because I like the bigger framework, not just the growing plants, but also the other aspects of it, the part of the natural building and energy production, all these sort of things.
Yeah. And so you fell in love with Vanessa Keegan. She's an English lady. And then somehow you ended up literally at the other side of the globe in New Zealand. How did that happen?
Well, it didn't happen in a hurry. We were still quite set on staying in Bolivia, and we brought up our children there in the formative years, which was an interesting experience. And also within the time frame, I did study at a organic agriculture university in Germany as a part-time student in order to get some certification to work in aid work with permaculture. That was my goal. That's why I studied. And that then actually happened even to the degree that my position with the development service was actually to teach what we now call Syntropy in the Amazon basin of Bolivia, where Ernst actually was running some courses as a consultant. And I met up with him there and was part of some of the workshops that he ran there. And then my job was to carry on with his impulse and work with local indigenous technicians on that agroforestry approach that he brought to Bolivia. And at the time, the Amazon basin was full of all sort of alternative agriculture, agroforestry projects, but somehow nothing kind of really tackled the situation there. And then Syntropy was seen as the magic bullet that would fix it all.
Mm.
And it was definitely having an impact, but it is a complex technique, and it's always hard to get farmers enthused about something that adds complexity to their lives.
Yeah. One question before we head to New Zealand. So you're working in the Amazon region. We've all heard the research that the Amazon is around a 12,000-year-old food forest, partly man-made, together with nature. What does a Swiss guy need to teach these people? How did they kind of forgot it, or how did that happen?
Yeah, they're the two things. One is the indigenous people locally have largely forgotten it. There is a tendency when your culture gets depleted in various ways, then these sort of traditions can get undermined and people migrate into this extractive way of looking at their traditional environment and get seduced.
By Coca-Cola.
Amongst other things, yes. And then they look at settler farmers, either people from the highlands, you call them settlers there, or before that already Spanish people that come in and burn big areas and put cattle in it or whatever. And you think, okay, that's what you have to do to get rich or to get by or whatever. And they copy that, and it doesn't take long, and whatever they did before is forgotten.
So it's a bit like my great grandmother. She knew all kind of medicines from herbal medicines, like grandmother's remedies, we'd call them. Now we all forgot them, and we pay a lot of money to follow courses for some things that my great grandmother would say, what the heck are you doing following courses? We all knew that. So it's a bit the same what happened over there.
Yeah, and I mean, the Amazon had some horrible history as well during the time of the rubber boom. There was, they came for all these areas and grabbed people to put them in slavery. So there was certainly a strong impact on the existing culture. But then, of course, people do have these forest gardens everywhere that we often don't even recognize.
Yeah.
I mean, most people walk around with a large degree of plant blindness. And they go somewhere and they cannot actually identify plants and it just looks green. So and it you have to develop an eye for that you actually can go into the forest. And I've noticed that a lot walking with some of my friends through parts of that Amazon region. And we would walk through the bush and it's nothing that catches your eye. And then suddenly you hit on a spot and you realize there's something going on or has been going on that was different. And then you see cacao trees suddenly in bigger groups, and you see the peach palms here and there, and you see this and that. So then you realize this was a little settlement at some point, or an aldea, or whatever you call it, in a hamlet. And then at some point it gets forgotten, either because people move on, they were semi-nomadic, or maybe they went to whatever. You don't know how long. Yeah.
And you mentioned Syntropy as a silver or golden bullet. Can you give me a very concrete example of a local place you went into and really saw that golden bullet in action?
I worked with probably 50, 60 different farmers, and with my colleagues, the technicians, I had some really good colleagues that I learned a lot from, and I was able to contribute to the project with my knowledge and experience. And we had this sort of thing like a road show. We would show up in one of those villages or communities that we selected, and we did a day of showing pictures that we drew on posters, and we did maybe some theater play about what Syntropy is about. People were often illiterate, and then the next day we did a installation. So we chop down some regrowers and bring it on the ground and plant bananas in and all the support species and whatever we found for the day as seeds and plant material would bring along. We didn't even make a sketch, but we would lay it out on the ground like as a guild. And then from there, it's copy and paste sort of thing. And then we would follow up every 6 weeks. We would come for a maintenance to show the farmer what's the next step. How do you need to maintain it now? And in some cases, it didn't go far. In other cases, it was very successful. And you could see some farmers really got the bug and they wouldn't let go of it anymore. There's a certain addiction that can come with it, but not everybody gets it.
Yeah, it's the virus, or you get it or you don't get it. And if you look now, you're a couple of decades later. Do you still know farmers you met a couple of decades ago that are still using it and are still happy with it?
No, I have no contact anymore. The NGO that I worked with at the time doesn't seem to exist anymore. But what I did recently was I looked at the satellite photo of that area. And I'm still quite familiar with the area and where we had our plots and so on. I know at the time the deforestation, because it was right next to a big biosphere reserve, and there was a lot of primary forest in that area. And they were taking it down at a very fast speed. And my role at the time was to slow that down, basically, by giving them perennial crops to grow and teach them how to use them and market them and whatnot. And now I look at the map and I have a feeling there's actually more forest cover now than there was when I was working there.
That's a good sign.
It is a really good sign. I was really pleased when I noticed that. Like, I imagined, I haven't looked for a while, it's going to be all just open grassland, whatever. But no, that didn't seem to have happened at all. They seem to have changed the tide on it and actually have more agroforestry systems in that area than open grassland and whatever they were embarking on at the time.
Yeah. When we're going to go to New Zealand just in a couple of minutes, but before that, I have one last question for you. There are some mathematical calculations that we need 550 hectares of 550 square kilometers. No, sorry, 550 million square kilometers of wait, I have to check the numbers because I'm not sure. No, it's actually 550 million hectares of land to cool down the planet with 2 degrees Celsius. That's more than 1 billion acres that we need to reforest to cool down the planet with 2 degrees Celsius. It's about doubling the Amazon rainforest. One of the things you hear a lot is that once the forest is gone and you have the new growth, that it's never going to be the same as the old growth. How do you look at that?
I'm not so much looking at the CO2 when it comes to forests.
It's about a biotic pump. It's about the sweating and putting latent heat into the atmosphere. I'm like even not looking at CO2, even ignoring it.
Cool. No, I'm totally with you on that. We need to create these biotic pumps wherever we can, and we cannot rely on a native forest alone on that. We actually have to use agriculture in order to do that. And the speed with which you can create something like that in Syntropy is just so much faster than if you do it in any other ways of agroforestry. That's my observation. And the density, creating a lot more a humid environment within the plants and above the plants and everything, it's really the ticket. When I say it's the magic bullet, I actually do believe it is. For me, syntropic agroforestry is the gold standard of food production when it comes to the beneficial effect on the planet.
While filming the movie Eat More Trees, we were in the Amazon rainforest. We also visited the place of Pedro Diniz that you might have heard about. Ernst Gotch also helped with that farm, and Fazenda da Toca, not far from
another place,
not far from Sao Paulo in Brazil. And there we saw that he has more biodiversity per acre. He has more trees per acre. That I later heard from Carlos Nobre that we can reverse the deforestation as good with agroforestry as with normal forests.
Yeah. No, I believe that, yeah. But mind you, I mean, the Datoka, I would look at it as being a very streamlined system because it's highly mechanized. It is a much leaner system than you would find a lot with small farmers that adopt syntropy, like in Bolivia, where they don't have to think about mechanization and where these systems evolve a lot more organically. There is such a high biodiversity. It's unreal. It's amazing. And what you always notice again and again, I see it in our food forest here, is there's actually so much more wildlife in these diverse food forests than you find in the native forest.
That's incredible.
Maybe not insects. I wouldn't know that. But when it comes to bigger animals like monkeys, tapirs, giant guinea pigs, and the lot that we had in South America, and here with birds, there is just so much more than you would find in a forest reserve next to you because we are in a mid succession and the production is just, you can't compare it to what you have in a native forest. It's so much higher.
And do you believe that you can recreate with syntropic agriculture the layered forest that a lot of people say once it's cut down, it's like impossible to get back to the old shape?
No, that's something that we do immediately.
So you think it's BS, that's thing that they're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say, yeah, we should substitute the native forest that are left with syntropy. No way. Of course, I'm not saying that. But we can do certain things faster than what happens in native forest, or if we let it go into native forest by itself. Definitely, there's that absolutely. There might be other qualities, of course, in other systems. So it's not an either or; it's both. We should try to get every piece of land under agriculture into a syntropic trajectory as much as we can. There are different grades, of course, but I mean, every land manager should look at how to use a syntropic way of thinking in their farm management or restoration management, erosion controls, whatever, and use the mindset of syntropy in that.
Yeah. And that mindset you also brought to New Zealand. You went to Aotearoa. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, Aotearoa, yep.
All right. And you arrived at a very steep and degraded land in Northland. What made you believe that you could bring it back to life?
Because there is no impossible land. Obviously, some landforms and soil types take harder work, that's for sure. And they never get to the full potential of an alluvial whatever soil. But the thing with soils is the better the soil, the more likely the soil has been abused with chemicals. And that's what you inherit. It's expensive because it's turning into residential areas, because it's a rich area. You know, rich soils bring rich people, bring high property prices and rich neighborhoods. So that's not us. And when you go to the marginal land, you usually find cleaner streams and more forest and more birds and, you know, these sort of things. And at the same time, it's land that's held by a trust rather than as a private property. And that is that's a good feeling that we are not the private owners of a piece of land. It's one of those paradigms that is a nice shift to do as well, that you don't have to own land in order to do regenerative work.
And maybe to give a perspective to our listener, Northland and New Zealand, what kind of climate do you have there? To which climates can you compare it?
It is kind of like a moist Mediterranean, mild, because we are an island in the southern hemisphere. The winters are always milder in the south, and the summers are always not so hot in general in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
And because we're an island, we have very maritime, mild climate. So we don't get much frost at all here, or hardly any.
To which place in Europe or United States could you compare it?
In Europe, it would be kind of like the Azore Islands, maybe.
Azore Islands. Okay. Yeah. Where it can be rough from time to time, but it's never freezing. And it's after a lot of rain, there's always plenty of blue skies and sunshine. You have, of course, not 4 seasons in one day, but like 3 seasons in one day.
Yeah. So the warmest part of New Zealand would be like the Azore Islands, and the colder parts of New Zealand would be like Ireland.
Yeah. All right. And United States, which states you think would be comparable?
Probably something else continental and therefore gets hotter in North America. No, I couldn't say. It's a difficult one.
Yeah. Maybe northern Florida a bit?
Yeah, but they can get hard frosts actually in hot summers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, more like maybe Northern California, maybe. No, warmer than
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's always interesting for Americans or
Yeah.
Europeans to
Up
kind of imagine where it is or.
on the mountain in Hawaii would be the one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds nice. So explain to me, how did you get into New Zealand? What brought you there?
Well, we didn't feel like staying indefinitely in Bolivia. It's kind of it's not an easy country to live in, if you can imagine. And
People-wise?
I mean, it's the poorest country, or at least it was at the time, the poorest country in South America. Yeah, so if you don't have work as a foreigner with an aid organization or something like that, then it's a bit hard. So you're always tied to that money from the outside sort of thing, especially if you don't have a family there. Anyway, it felt like it was time to move on and we didn't want to go back to Europe. And then, yeah, we sort of New Zealand and we managed to get the visa for it. Yeah.
Was it one of the lowest inhabitants per square mile that attracted you to there, and the stunning nature that you always hear about?
Yeah, I mean, I must say we had some illusions about it being some sort of a permaculture country,
And they were illusions.
but it has potential. It has
That's a nice way to put it.
potential.
Yeah. So you went to New Zealand, but you just said that you didn't buy land. You went into a land that's like a trust or something.
Yeah, I mean, we still had some investment in that, and but yeah, it's not a private title. It's held under trust, and it works well. And so we have a section that we can use to grow things and pass on to our children. So that's good. The whole farm is something like 80 hectares, but a lot of it is bush. It's all under common. And every household, we have 6 households here, every household comes with a 2-acre section where we can grow our stuff. And if you want more than that, like we do a bit more for markets and we are basically leasing a bit more land from the community to do other things as well.
Yeah. Are New Zealand's first biodynamical certified mushroom grower. Is that true?
Yeah, true. Yeah. We had a few first, yeah.
And can you tell me more about how you went into mushrooms?
I did it as a teenager already at home in Germany, growing some shiitakes, and then when I worked with Syntropy in Bolivia, and we had all these logs that we just put on the ground to rot. I said, wow, it would be nice if we could inoculate them with shiitake, but didn't know really much about that. And then when we came here, the first half year in New Zealand, we went around woofing, and one of our house grew shiitakes in a way that I thought that's like how I would want to do it. And so when we were still renting in the community, we have to do a certain time of probation. So I started doing things that I could take with me in case it didn't work out. I thought shiitake logs was the thing, and so I did a lot of that. And then when I was teaching for the Polytech as a job, I taught a mushroom course as well and got into growing oyster mushrooms and stuff. And then when we certified this Demeter, we wanted to get the mushrooms certified, and nobody had done that before. So we had to work together with them to create the plan for the Demeter mushrooms. And then it was funny because we figured out a way to grow oyster mushrooms on gorse, which is a hated weed here in Zealand. It's a prickly shrub.
Turn your problem into the solution.
Yeah. And and it turned out to be one of the best substrates we could come up with. And then it was funny, everything that you use for your production in Demeter has to be treated with the Demeter, with the biodynamic preparations. So I would go around spraying the gorse, not with herbicides like our neighbors do, but with biodynamic preparations in order that the gorse is, has the right life force to go into the oyster mushrooms.
Your neighbors must have thought you're
They probably thought I do the right thing. I put herbicide on it. Yeah.
yeah, they didn't know. They thought, okay, nice, good, you're doing a good job. Crazy. So Demeter is a label for people that don't know it. That's for biodynamic agriculture. It goes a step further than organic agriculture. How do you see the different labels, the different names? You have organic, Demeter, agroforestry, syntropic agroforestry, agroecology. How do you see everything? Yeah, towards each other.
Well, Demeter is the most demanding of all the certifications here in New Zealand. And they have certain values that line up with permaculture and syntropy. And that is, they are not certifying, say, a monocrop of broccoli or so. That's not what they would do. Whereas you can get that with other organic certifications. You can just grow broccolis every year, and as long as you only use fish fertilizer and not potassium nitrate, then you're sweet. But with Demeter, they wouldn't fly. So they want to see that you have ideally an animal integration in the farm, which we do, of course. And they want to see that you compost everything, which is a bit more an issue for us because ideally we don't compost. We put mulch and manure straight out. That's not what Demeter does. So we had to change that. And they want to see the farm as an organism, as a system. Well, that's what we do in permaculture and in syntropy. So they look at a lot of things in a holistic way, where in other certifying bodies you don't see that. So for us, again, it's like the gold standard of produce is the Demeter.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I always advise people that a lot of people don't know what to believe. And it's like you say, you can grow, like a lot of organic farmers are doing it fantastic. But if you follow the letter to the law, you can also have a very degenerative way of organic growing. For example, depleting groundwater reserves, having monocultures using plastic, whatever. And that's why I say, well, if you have the supply of Demeter certified, and if you have the money to buy it, that should be like the gold standard, and that should be like the base, and everything else needs to go up. So no, super glad that you're having that in New Zealand. Is it already a big thing in New Zealand, biodynamic farming?
It's
Not like Germany,
It's very small.
because Germany is probably one of the biggest countries in biodynamic farming, right? Where it originated.
Yeah. Germany, Switzerland, Austria, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So your first mushroom grower in New Zealand, biodynamical certified. You said you were first at other things as well. Which things?
Oh, yeah. We were known at some point as being the largest banana plantation in New Zealand, but we have lost that status. But the funny thing is, I mean, we are not running a banana orchard. We are not running a banana monoculture. The bananas were a stepping stone. So the bananas are sort of thinning out a bit now. We have enough for ourselves and a bit to sell. But they were basically a stepping stone for the next crop for us, which is chirimoya, which is now coming into full production. And we have hundreds of chirimoya trees. And actually they're not as easy as a crop as bananas, but they bring a higher price as well. There's not much competition on that. And that works perfectly in our system and our site as well. It's really the plant is made for here. So that's our main crop right now. And then later on, there will be other crops that are even slower to come on. It's a fruit called lucuma. So yeah, we might not be the biggest banana plantations anymore, but we might be now the biggest chirimoya producer.
Yeah. Okay.
And in another few years down the line, we're going to be the biggest lucuma producer in New Zealand. So, I mean,
It's a succession.
yeah, it's a succession. At the same time, there's not much competition out there.
Yeah.
It's normally only grown as a hobby, these fruit I'm talking about.
Yeah. One question about the chirimoya tree. That's like the family of the Annona cherimola, the Annona muricata. I heard that in some countries it's forbidden to grow it as food because there could be like neurotoxicity effects and Parkinson effects. Is that true, or is that just a myth?
Well, it's funny. Just recently, it was in some other side. It was seen as one of the healthiest foods or fruits to eat. I mean, the seeds are poisonous, so maybe they did the test with the seeds. Also, I'd say there's something in the skin, so when you eat them, you probably shouldn't scrape it too hard onto the skin. But otherwise, I mean, these kind of fruit, they're meant to be eaten by by primates like us. Why would a tree make them poisonous if it depends on us to take the seeds around? So yes, there is something in the rest of the plant, and that gives us an advantage. Like animals don't touch it much. You don't have any pets going for cherimoya, and even if the goats get loose, they would need a cherimoya tree.
Yeah.
There are certain advantages with that, but I can't imagine the fruit being actually that dangerous at all. But yeah, the skin I can imagine, and the seeds definitely, yeah.
Yeah. It's like with the yew tree. If you eat the fruit, it's super delicious. But if you eat the seeds, if you eat 3 of them, you die. So you have to be careful. No, super
right.
cool. Another thing that you pioneered in is creating a database for Syntropic Agroforestry, a kind of permaculture planner, the SAP database. Can you tell me more about that and how that works?
Yeah, so we have another platform where we air educational videos on a weekly basis, what we're doing here and this and that. So we have created quite a community around that over the years. And one of our followers approached us and said, I'm in the Canary Islands and I love what you're doing and learning from you. But I can see people like me, we need a bit more information on plants, what they can handle, what they like, what they are good for, and this and that in a user-friendly way. And he is a software programmer, and he could put something together. So
Was that the Dutch guy?
yeah,
Yeah.
Toon. So we thought, yeah, that's great. Let's make another site together with him, and so we became partners on that. And so he did all the coding, and we did the layer, the artworks, and the information for the different filters and for the plant manager tool. And also we fill it up with other educational videos and text and so on to give it instruction as well and pass on information on how to use syntropic principles.
Yeah. And would it also work for temperate climates?
No, absolutely. It includes everything between the poles. Of course, not very nuanced like the US climate sort of codes and so on. It's a bit more broad and flexible. Just as our climate is getting more flexible.
Yeah.
There are no clear lines anymore anyway. It's a good starting point to learn about plants in your climate, in your soil, how to manage them, how to propagate them, through a lens of permaculture and especially syntropy. So it's a tool that's ideal for people that have already some gardening permaculture skills and want to get fully into the syntropy mode. That's probably ideal for them, but also for beginners, for landscape designers, for restoration workers. It's useful for anybody, anyone in the rich world.
Because what does the app or the website exactly do? You can select your terrain and start drawing lines on it, and then you'll have like plant selections, stuff like that.
No, it doesn't give you a planting plan. We stay away from that quite consciously because it can be overwhelming and also misleading in some ways. We are more focusing on creating this grid of potential candidates for your planting when it comes to lifespan and strata. Or strata means what canopy layer the plant needs to go to, not the height, it's the canopy layer. So how much light does it need? Does it have to be in full sun, medium, or can it be in the lower strata after all the other layers have taken the sun away already? So where does the plant fit in there in the lifespan? That means once you have that grid figured out, you have no gaps in your food forest as it progresses through time. Because what often happens is that everything looks fantastic. Year 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can see on YouTube at the moment, the world is full of these amazing, thriving 3-year-old food forests all around the world, and they look great. But you get to year 5, 8, 10, or whatever, and suddenly there are holes in your system. Something you cannot shape into that space. It's either gone or it hasn't been planted, and suddenly your food forest looks too thin.
Mm-hmm.
Or you want to avoid those errors by making sure that you have everything covered for the full lifespan of your food forest. And it doesn't have to be the 100 years. You can create.
Is it because it's gonna be too late, that it's like too late to fill the holes in afterwards?
It's not, you can do it, but it's really difficult.
Because there's too much shade?
Basically, you have to cut a lot of vegetation down in order to fill these gaps. And that's heartbreaking, and it costs you time, and it sets your crops back and all these sort of things. I mean, you can do it, but you try to avoid it.
And so you're actually planning for the next decades that you make sure that the first plants you put in the ground are already like gonna fill in the gaps in 5 years, for example. You won't notice it the first 5 years, but after the first 3 to 5 years, then these plants will suddenly grow and fill in the gaps that would otherwise come. And is that something that's only in like tropical, subtropical climates, or is that the same in temperate climates?
No, it's the same anywhere. You can also put other plants in later, and then for that we have a filter, like it's called can establish in shade. So when you realize you have gaps, there are certain plants you could still bring in, or at least they don't need a total reset in order to come up again. So there's this interesting category of plants that can be introduced later, but you try to avoid these situations. And also, just to give you an idea of what can go into your system, and then you filter through it. So we also call it like it's a plant dating site. You find plants that you can fall in love with that you didn't know before.
Love it. Yeah, that's what we all need. We need to fall in love with new plants and taste them and just be madly in love with them. For example, I really remember the first time I ate the pau pau. That was really crazy. The Asimina triloba. It was like, oh my God, in Germany, in Belgium, in UK, in temperate climates, you can grow a freaking mango like fruit, you know? That's once you know that, there's no way back.
But then also, I mean, the tool includes a lot of weeds, because in their native habitat, they're not weeds, they are just another plant. So we have a lot of weeds in that, what some people in some countries call weeds, in our database, because sometimes there are these plants that you have under your nose and you have never thought of using them in a certain way. I mean, using them within the system in a certain way, systematically, to fulfill their function and then disappear. Right. And so often having these plant lists tells you something. Oh, yeah, of course, that plant. Why did I not think about that one?
Yeah.
It's right under your nose. It is perfect for your situation, but you've never looked at it because somehow you didn't pay attention.
Yeah. You didn't observe enough. Can you give me a very concrete example? Let's say I want to grow a syntropic food forest in Germany or in UK, and I want to like include a lot of apples and walnuts. Could you like sketch out how you would go out and plant those and maybe some companion plants around it?
Yeah, so you will do what we have in our plant database is we put the crops in with their fixed distances if you would do a conventional orchard, right? So that's the distance we give. But then all the other plants that are normally not mentioned as any crops or so, the bystanders or whatever, we are looking at them as being part of the system, of course. And yeah, we also give the indication how close they can be together if that's all for that strata. And say, for instance, you want to do a pear orchard or walnut orchard or something. Okay, you plant them sort of at the distance as you would do commercially, but you're not waiting for 3 years or so until they start producing. You have another crop beforehand in there. And say, for instance, you take elderberry. So you pack in elderberries as thick as it was crop, right? And then for the first years, you also put artichokes in as it was your only crop in there, and so on and so on. So you put all these things in, and amongst that, you still put anything else in that you can get your hands on that you would think it works in there, because you can always take it out what's too much, but you try to put in by seeds or by sticks. If things can grow from a stick, you put it, it's cheap. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
So then them out later. You don't want to go and buy your non-crop plants from a tree nursery and pay a lot of money for it. You don't want to do that.
So To make it very concrete, you would say, let's say walnut trees, you're going to put them between 8 and 12 or 15 meters apart, like in a nice grid. Then you're going to put apple trees in between. Then you're going to put elderberries in between as well, and just whatever you want. But make sure that these trees also like fill in the gaps before the walnuts becomes into fruit, something like that. That first you have like the symphony of first the lower strata and then the bigger strata.
Yep. Except for the apples, like there is definitely some allopathy between walnuts and apples, so I wouldn't use apples there. The mulberries are okay with walnuts, but apples and walnuts, I mean, the apples don't like it. In Syntropy, we often notice that the allopathy that people talk about is not as obvious at all.
Yeah, we noticed it too, yeah.
Because of that higher diversity, it seems to wash out somehow. And or get assimilated or metabolized or whatever. But nevertheless, you don't want to swim too much against the current. I mean, there are these sort of effects. We cannot deny that. So we have to be a bit smart on that. But yeah, in general, a lot like the walnuts and the elderberries together, or the mulberries and the elderberries and the walnuts. So that's why you have to understand the lifespan and the strata, because you don't want to overload the same strata with too many things of the same lifespan. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the understanding you need to get. And that's where the tool helps you. And then when you put it into practice, there's also a sort of thing that is like a cosmic guidance that you get once you get it going.
Sounds crazy. Cosmic guidance.
I mean, it's just once you start thinking that way, it becomes obvious to a large degree.
Okay, yeah.
And with practice, you feel like you get into a flow with it. It's like you just know what to do.
Yeah. One thing
you need to start somewhere. You need to get your plants together. They're not suddenly showing up at your doorstep. You have to go out and get them. Usually, find them somewhere, borrow them.
Talk to your neighbors and ask for some willow branches. A thing I see a lot in food forestry is that they never think about the final stage people. The final succession stage, you have all your like high apple trees pretty close together, and then all the rest is gone, and you just have like these apple trees and then grassland underneath it. How do you deal with that? Because everything needs to stay like a circle, right? How do you design for that?
Yeah, that is really, you put your finger on it. And yes, you find that with normal commercial orchards, the stagnation of a system, I can't even call it a system. And funny enough, I see that a lot in permaculture as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even so, there is diversity, but at some point, fairly soon, it becomes the stagnant diversity. And to be honest, often very limited diversity too, and not enough density. And then you have things filling up the spaces that you might not want. Yeah, keeping that dynamic is really key. I think that is possibly the most important thing in Syntropy is keeping it dynamic and do this dynamic strata management. Like every canopy in the system is not this fixed canopy. It comes and goes, it shrinks and swells, it gets pruned heavily, recovers beautifully, and then gets taken out and replanted and this and that. So yeah, that's how it has to be. And at a faster pace than you would find in nature, because we also want more produce from it. That's just how we are. And so we need to create this fast pace of dynamics of.
If I read between the lines of what you just said, does that mean that first and for all, you need to have very close planting distances, put everything closer together so they are more growing in height and like keeping each other in check? That's like step one. And then step two, do magic with your pruning. Would that be it?
I think the density means you have more individual plants, but each plant is a bit more tight. And I think that is important, that you have more individuals rather than fewer of the same species. There's something in it, it's hard to put a finger on it, but there is that. And then the heavy pruning makes it possible that they can be in such high numbers. And that gives you also the flexibility. If the system gets too thin, then you can let those individuals swell up and close the ranks. There might be a time when you need that, and then there might be a time when you can shrink them down or or cull them out. But if you don't have enough individuums, you cannot do that. And then you don't want spindly trees necessarily sowing your crops.
What
So
do you
you
mean
need
with
to
spindly
know,
trees?
you don't want sort of straggly crop trees. Your crop trees have to get enough light of what they need.
Okay.
Always have to make sure that they are supplied, but that doesn't mean they have to be in the full sun either, obviously. Like in the case of Chirimoya, it does better in a medium high strata, which is sort of semi-shade. They're healthier that way. They might not produce as much, also they usually do. Or take cacao, for instance. Cacao is often planted in open sun because it produces more, but it's a
bad.
production, the stress.
Yeah.
And that sunlight is funneled into a higher crop, but it comes at a high price of plant diseases and so on.
Yeah.
And loss of soil life and all these sort of things. So you have to put in fertilizer, pesticides, all these sort of things to keep them going.
Yeah. But you do have to keep in mind the rule that the further you go from the equator, the further you have to put the plants from each other, right? Or don't you agree with that?
Yeah, there is something like that. Yeah, but not as much as people think.
Okay.
The same goes for, we all understand that when you go into dry lands, you have plants more apart. To some degree, that's true, but not as much as we think.
So we
If
don't
we
have
find plants that can handle arid situations, we can actually create very dense system under arid conditions as well.
So we don't have to be afraid to put our pioneers trees too close to our cropping trees.
Again, it's a sort of a cliche that we have that plants steal from each other. There are certain circumstances where that is true, but under the management in Syntropy with the pruning, the stratification, all these sort of things, you actually find it is not the case.
Yeah. Okay.
That actually they start creating this microorganism together that attracts humidity and harvests the humidity, the dew and everything through the mycorrhizal networks and passes it around. And trees with deeper roots like eucalyptus can bring up the water and it humidifies around your crops rather than them stealing the water from your crop, but only with the right management. You expect a overgrown, a full-blown eucalyptus to be nice to your apple tree. No, of course not. You banana. But with the management that we give it, it turns the table. And then suddenly the eucalypt is actually a water pump for the banana rather than taking the water away from the banana.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So if I were to give you a space of land and I would give you 100 trees, you rather put them close to each other than far from each other.
Yeah, unless you want to graze under your trees, and that's a different story. Yeah. There are horses for courses, but in general, yes.
Okay. So we talked about the origins and evolution of your thinking and where you got your inspiration from. We talked about some key projects of you and went technical into more details about Syntropy. If we now talk to go towards the end of this podcast episode, I always like to talk a bit about philosophy and the long-term vision. For you, what has been your biggest failures in your journey, and what have you learned from it? If you had to think about like 3 things that you really were like.
I think initially when I started here, coming from the Amazon, and I had the right thoughts about how I would go about here, but then initially I was a bit intimidated by the commercial orchards all around here in New Zealand, which do produce a humongous amount of food, definitely. I mean, it's impressive and easy picking, right? Easily mechanized and all these sort of things. And initially I thought, well, you're here now, you have to do it kind of like that, or at least somewhere in between or whatever. In permaculture, the old-fashioned permaculture was kind of a bit like in between. So for a long time I did that and I didn't go strong enough on the syntropic bend. And I had to pay a price for that. I could have saved a lot of labor if I had gone more into the way I did syntropy in Bolivia, there's more faith in it, rather than thinking, yeah, that worked in the Amazon, it's not going to work here. No. I lost faith a bit in the beginning, and that cost me a lot of extra time and so on. And I could do what I did over the years. If I would do it again, I could do it a lot easier now, knowing what I know now.
What's the biggest success you had? You think if you look back at your journey and say, okay, well, that was really, that's what defines success for me in this world.
That our children are interested in what I'm doing here, and they joined in as partners in the business and teaching on their own and designing on their own, and just took it on and went in their own way, but in a similar permaculture fashion, developing their own space within our education business and taking on their own areas on the farm, and just want to live here and live the same life. That's great, and I hope it's going to work with the grandchildren the same.
You did a good.
If we do need the succession, then I'm too old to climb the trees. Someone else needs to do it, that's for sure. And then also the people that got inspired here, and some of them have turned into teachers themselves and take it to their own projects and inspire other people again. So that's great. So I think we had for a while a very crucial role to play in the development of the Syntropic movement, where we kicked the ball along, and now there are a lot of people doing that. So that's great.
Yeah. If you look ahead in the next 10 years for your own life, but also for the planet, for the entire world, how do you see that regenerative food movement, agroforestry, food forestry could be in 2035, 2040, 2050, for example? How do you think that would be the perfect revolution going that way in your ideal world?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It depends a lot of how the rest of the economy goes in the world, how that can go along with it. And the different scenarios where Syntropy would still fit in no matter what. At the moment, it's growing exponentially, and anything that grows exponentially can take over the planet pretty quick. So with the help of the internet, it is spreading so fast, and you can see how people get so excited about it and so into it, and it is infectious. It's super infectious in a good way. So I think that it's going to be full of surprises if the world allows it. It's going to take over.
Yeah. What is your biggest fear in life?
That we as humans recognize it too late. What a amazing paradise we can create with that type of regenerative agriculture, and it would be tragic that we recognize what we could have done and it's kind of too late. That would be awful.
If you look at the state of our planet, if you do watch the news, which is not always a good idea to watch it too much, but if you do watch the news, see what's going on, what's your main emotion?
It's almost hard to imagine that it could go any crazier. Hopefully, because maybe it's so crazy that at some point it has to flip over and go the other way, because sometimes those things happen. They go totally crazy before they come to some reason.
And that craziness, what emotion does that provoke with you?
Yeah, kind of an anger. And it's kind of, when Bill Mollison was asked what motivates him, and he said, my anger. Yeah, sometimes that does come up. Yeah, swinging the machete is a good therapy. Yeah.
Everybody should get a machete and get a food forest. One last question. If you had a magic wand, you had no money restraints, and you could literally do anything with that wand that you want, what would you do with it? What one thing would you do with that magic wand?
It would be great to be able to help people establish farms to do syntropy, because a lot of people would want to do something like that, but if they start with borrowed money and have to pay interest on it, it's just too hard. So to be able to give people a start, that they can start with the infrastructure and the land and everything without being in debt to anybody. If one could create a fund like that, under the condition that it would be managed with permaculture syntropy in the lot, creating such a fund, which in the end, at some point, there should be, the money should go a long way doing that. Let's put it that way. Even if it might not come back, but at least it would go a long way doing good.
Yeah.
If you find the right people, train more people to do that. And I mean, my role I see now is I want to train trainers. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that for a long time now, but I want to do more of that still. That's my role. I don't want to necessarily teach beginners, but I want to teach trainers, and because we need,
Exponential.
yeah. And then if we had funds like that to get people land and infrastructure, create exchange networks for the machinery that we do use, we don't need a lot, but a bit helps for the installations and seed banks and whatnot, that would be money well spent. It would go a long way.
That's a nice way to end this podcast. We need to have these buffers available for people who want to start regenerating the land. Fully agree with that, and I probably think that our listener will also agree with that. All right. Well, before we end this podcast, is there any last words you'd like to send to the world of wonderful food foresters?
Well, if you're on the journey with permaculture and especially syntropy, all the best to you. There will be stretches of hard work, but these challenges make you harder and wiser. Yeah, it's a beautiful journey, has its ups and downs, but trust it. You're on the side of life. And for those who haven't got into it, just jump into it, learn what you can about plants as if your life depends on it, because it does. And start connecting with nature by actually entering the dialogue, by observing and interacting, as Peter Mollison says, the first principle. And interacting for us means applying syntropic principles to a landscape and see what happens. And you can find any landscape, can be a dump site, a wasteland, whatever. Start playing around with certain pruning techniques and whatnot, and see how the system responds, and train yourself on weeds and see how they can make a place more fertile. It's it's easy to see that feedback,
All
and
right.
it's not an experiment.
Well, dear listener, you know what to do. This was an amazing podcast with nobody else than Klaus Lotz, really one of the pioneers working in all climates on this planet. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and looking forward to see you on the next episode. If you want to learn more about it, go to www.foodforestpodcast.com and see you on the next episode.